Okay, so ready to dive into some Jordan Peterson.
Always up for a good thought-provoking session.
Right, 12 Rules for Life. We've got some excerpts. Let's see what we can pull out, kind of cut through the noise, get to the core of it. You know, living, it's messy, right?
Oh, absolutely.
How do we handle the unknowns, all that, and find some, I don't know, some meaning, some grounding in it all?
Well, and that's the thing. This isn't like surface level advice, right? We're talking about ideas anchored in psychology, pulling from myths, history, all of that, to really understand like what makes us tick, us as humans,
Yeah, the structures we build, societies, all that, yeah.
and where we fit into it all.
And right from the start, in the foreword, it jumps into this idea of being non-judgmental, which is fascinating.
Okay, interesting.
Because it says, in therapy, yeah, it's a technique, right? To help people be honest with themselves, explore their thoughts without like instantly shutting down.
Right, safe space, all that.
But then it makes this really sharp contrast saying, wait a minute, rules, morality, those are absolutely essential for any kind of civilization to even work.
Oh, that's a good point.
So we're immediately in this complex area of how we judge what we value.
What's fascinating is, right off the bat, it's all about context. It's not a simple judge or don't judge. It's like when, why, all of that nuance. I like that.
Yeah, and the way it's written, you
Yeah.
can tell, like, the author's excited to share this stuff.
You feel that enthusiasm?
Yeah, like this enthusiastic, almost childlike, I found something cool, let me tell you about it kind of vibe.
It's contagious, that kind of energy.
It doesn't feel like a lecture. It's more like, hey, this got me thinking. Maybe it'll get you thinking too.
Yeah, it's inviting, pulls you in.
Very down to earth.
Exactly.
One thing that grabs you early on is this deep dive into the whole human capacity for evil.
Oh, yeah, heavy stuff.
And not just like the obvious bad guy evil, but the kind that's twisted, done in the name of good.
That's scary when you think about it.
And then there's this whole like mystery of self-deception. How do we do that to ourselves, blind ourselves?
It's so easy to fall into, right?
And even mention this like evil for the sake of evil, referencing Paradise Lost, Milton.
Wow.
It's like, all right, time to face the dark side of humanity.
And recognizing that potential in ourselves, right? That we
Yeah.
all have that capacity for both good and bad.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a fundamental thing across so many philosophies.
It's not shying away from the tough stuff.
And I think the focus on self-deception is huge because, like, our biases, the stories we tell ourselves, that's powerful stuff.
Oh, for sure.
Affects everything, right? Our actions, the world around us.
The book really makes this point that like our human experience now, it's not just some isolated moment, right?
It's all connected.
It connects it back to evolution, DNA, our brains, these ancient stories that keep getting passed down.
It's all part of the bigger picture.
And the idea is those stories, they offer us some kind of map, right, for navigating all the unknown, the uncertainty of life.
Wow, that's powerful.
Like, we're not the first ones to go through this, right?
And there's wisdom in those stories.
Exactly.
The mention of maps of meaning, I think that's really important here.
Tell me about that.
So essentially, it's exploring this like human drive, right? We try to make sense of chaos,
Not crave that order, yeah.
to create meaning out of it from like the beginning of time, basically.
Then it gets into this, like, paradox of tolerance, which I find really interesting.
What's that?
So today, there's this huge emphasis on being tolerant of everything.
Tolerance is good, right?
Well, but it can go too far, is the point. Like,
Mhm.
it can make people hesitant to make any kind of judgment or even, like, offer guidance to younger people.
Oh, I see what you mean.
So what happens is this practical wisdom, the stuff that used to get passed down, it's kind of disappearing.
We're losing that, huh?
Yeah, and even the concept of virtue, like, it feels outdated.
I think it makes you think, though, right? What are the downsides of this, like absolute tolerance all the time?
Right, exactly.
If we're afraid to even say what we value or offer any direction, are we doing a disservice?
Especially to young people trying to figure things out.
Right. They need some kind of compass, don't they?
The sources actually dig into where this moral relativism might have come from. This idea that there's no one right way.
Where does that come from? Yeah.
So it looks at how we've become aware of all these different moral codes throughout history.
It's different cultures, different times. Yeah.
And then anthropological studies, seeing all these diverse societies, how they do things.
They see you question your own assumptions, right?
Totally. And then the impact of science on religious ethics. That's been huge.
That's changed things for sure.
And the point it makes is this idea that we can totally separate facts and values like they're clean cut. That's probably wrong,
Oh, that's interesting.
because our values actually shape how we see facts.
So it's all connected.
Yeah, it's not so simple.
Okay, so how did these 12 rules even come about? Like, where'd they come from?
So apparently, it started on Quora, that online question and answer site.
Oh, really?
And Peterson was just answering questions. It's like this accidental organic thing.
Wow, from Quora, huh?
Yeah, like people just throwing out questions. He's giving his honest thoughts.
That's cool. Very grassroots.
And I guess it resonated, with people.
Clearly, it struck a chord with a lot of folks.
Yeah, it wasn't like planned out as a book from the start.
So it was a genuine response to, like, what people were actually struggling with.
Exactly. And there's this other big influence too, this critique of happiness as the end goal.
Oh, interesting. Tell me more about that.
So it looks at like some really dark historical periods, Nazi Germany, the Soviet Union,
Oh, wow.
and references Solzhenitsyn, who went through those camps, saw firsthand how quickly suffering can just shatter any idea that life's all about being happy.
That's a sobering thought.
It is. And it makes you think maybe happiness isn't the point. Maybe it's about developing character, in the face of all that.
So, like, resilience, inner strength, that kind of thing.
Yeah, finding meaning even when things are tough.
That's a huge shift in perspective, isn't it?
It is, for sure. And it leads into the whole idea of value systems, like how important they are.
Okay, value systems, yeah.
So shared cultural values, they give us these hierarchies, right? They tell us what's important.
A way to prioritize, kind of.
Exactly. And we need that, both for taking action and even just for how we see the world.
It shapes our perception of reality, huh?
It does. We need goals, right?
Uh-huh.
But meaningful goals are always tied to what we value.
So, like, our values drive our goals.
Yeah, and when we feel like we're making progress towards those valued goals, that's where positive emotions come from.
So it's not just about feeling happy, it's about feeling like you're moving towards something that matters.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
But without that framework, without those values, the inherent suffering, the stuff that's just part of life, can lead to this sense of like nihilism, like nothing matters.
So values give us meaning, purpose, all of that.
Yeah, they give us something to hold on to.
Yeah.
And so if that's the danger, nihilism, chaos, what's the antidote?
Right. What's the solution?
Well, according to this, it's individual responsibility.
Take ownership, basically.
Yeah, it's on each of us to strive to be better, to take responsibility for our lives, our communities, even the world.
That's a lot to take on.
It is, but it boils down to, like, telling the truth, trying to fix what's broken, even in small ways.
I like that. It's empowering, puts the power in your hands.
It does. And to illustrate this idea of territory, it uses this great example, a little wren defending its birdhouse.
Okay, a wren, that's specific.
Yeah, it shows how conflict often comes from competition for resources, right?
Limited resources, everyone wants their share.
But then it points out animals, they've developed these strategies, almost rituals, to establish dominance without killing each other.
That's smart.
Like a wolf will expose its throat to the most vulnerable spot.
Wow, a sign of submission.
Or a bearded dragon, they do this ways like, back off, this is mine.
Like a little dance.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So they're negotiating status, but avoiding all-out war.
That shows a kind of like innate wisdom, right? Of preserving the social order.
It does. And then gets even deeper into the biology, talking about the neurochemistry of status.
The science behind it.
And they use lobsters as an example, which is kind of funny.
Lobsters. Okay, I'm intrigued.
So lobsters, they have these levels of serotonin and this other thing called octopamine.
Serotonin, that's the feel-good chemical, right?
Right. And it turns out these levels directly affect their posture and how confident they are.
So like their body language and their attitude.
Yeah, and the winners in these lobster fights, they have higher serotonin.
The winners feel good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What's crazy is Prozac, the drug that affects serotonin in humans, it has the same effect on lobsters.
Whoa, so it's a really ancient fundamental thing, this connection.
Yeah, showing how deeply rooted this whole status thing is across species.
Evolutionarily, it goes way back.
And in humans, low serotonin is linked to, like, less confidence, more stress, even worse health outcomes.
So it's not just about feeling happy, it's about your whole well-being.
Right, it affects everything.
Right.
And then it takes a look at this reality of unequal distribution.
Okay, unequal distribution, what do you mean?
So it talks about the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule.
Oh, right, like 80% of the effects come from 20% of the causes.
Exactly. And it points out that in creative fields, it's often the case that a small percentage of creators produce most of the influential work.
Like the rock stars, the big names.
Yeah, think about classical music, Bach, Beethoven,
Kind of
Mozart,
thoughtless, right? Or
tiny fraction of composers, but their work still dominates.
centuries later, yeah.
And it's not just music. It's like that in science, in writing, all sorts of fields.
That's fascinating. So a few individuals have a disproportionate impact.
Yeah, and it leads to this argument that the dominance hierarchy, this whole idea of status, it's not some new invention, it's ancient.
Like built into nature itself.
Yeah, predating our current social structures, capitalism, even patriarchy.
So not just a human thing.
Right, it's been around for like 500 million years, this constant negotiation of where we stand relative to others.
Wow, that's a long time.
And the consequences for those at the bottom, they're rough. It affects everything. Access to resources, health, social standing.
Being low status is tough.
It is, yeah. It's linked to more illness, more suffering, even a shorter lifespan.
That's like survival level stuff.
It is. It's serious.
Yeah.
Okay, switching gears a bit, it gets into some more practical advice.
Okay, practical tips. Let's hear them.
One big one is routine. The importance of routine, especially sleep and eating patterns.
Consistency, yeah, I can see that.
Because when those are erratic, it messes with your body's systems.
Throws everything off.
Yeah, and it makes negative emotions worse.
Makes sense.
Consistent wake-up times, that's really emphasized.
That's a good one. Stick to a schedule.
Yeah, it's a key strategy for managing anxiety and depression.
I've heard that before, keeping that routine.
And then it uses this analogy of feedback in a sound system.
Okay, a sound system, what do you mean?
So, you know how like a little feedback can get amplified, become this huge problem?
Oh, yeah, that screeching noise.
It's like that with problems in life, these destructive, positive feedback loops.
A little thing becomes a big thing.
Exactly, like addiction.
Makes sense. It spirals out of control.
More anxiety, how it can escalate.
You get caught in that loop.
The point is, small issues, if you ignore them, they can blow up.
You got to catch 'em early.
Now, obviously, unchecked aggression, that's bad, but the text also cautions against suppressing anger completely
Oh, that's interesting.
because it can make you vulnerable to being taken advantage of, you know,
You can't just let people walk all over you.
and it can prevent you from standing up against injustice.
Sometimes you got to fight back.
It presents resentment as a kind of alarm bell, like, hey, something's wrong here.
Pay attention to that feeling.
Yeah, both for yourself and for the community.
So, anger can be a signal, not always a bad thing.
Here's an idea that might sound counterintuitive. It says acknowledging the potential for evil and monstrosity within ourselves can actually lead to less fear.
Whoa, really?
Yeah, and more self-respect, and even make us stronger when facing, like, oppression.
It's like knowing your own darkness makes you less afraid of it in others.
Yeah, and it's linked to a stronger character.
That's a powerful thought.
It's not just our minds either. Physical posture matters.
Like stand up straight, all that.
Yeah, standing tall, shoulders back. It's not just physical, it's metaphysical.
Okay, I'm listening.
It's about accepting the burdens of being, of existence.
You know, shoulders back, ready to face the world.
In this posture, it can affect how our nervous system responds to life's challenges.
So there's a mind-body connection.
Oh, for sure. Then it talks about order and chaos, these fundamental forces.
Okay, order and chaos.
Chaos is like formless potential, pure possibility.
Unlimited potential, yeah.
Order is structure, predictability.
The known, the familiar.
And it argues that real meaning comes from mediating between these two.
That's where the magic happens, right?
Yeah, that edge between what we know and the unknown, that's where we feel most alive.
That liminal space.
It emphasizes how powerful female mate selection has been in shaping human evolution.
Oh, interesting.
Women choosing who to partner with, that's been a huge driver of our development.
So women have shaped the course of humanity.
They have, for sure. And then it gets into some cool evolutionary stuff.
Like what?
So, like, our sharp vision, the reason we can see so well, might be because we needed to spot dangerous snakes.
Really? To avoid getting bitten?
Yeah, and it even connects that to the Garden of Eden story, the snake being so prominent.
That makes you think, doesn't it?
It does. And on a lighter note, color vision, that's linked to finding ripe fruit.
So survival and delicious snacks.
Exactly. But it also acknowledges something we all know, that we can be so hard on ourselves.
Oh, for sure, that inner critic.
We're often way more judgmental of ourselves than anyone else, right?
We know all our flaws, our secrets.
And it can lead to self-contempt, which is rough.
It's a tough cycle to break.
But then it makes this point that despite all that potential for negativity, the human capacity for cooperation and productivity is amazing.
We get a lot done when you think about it.
We do. Most people, even with all the potential for conflict, They want to be productive, to contribute.
We build these complex societies. It's pretty incredible.
It is. And it leads into this really important piece of advice: choosing your friends wisely.
Ah, good friends. They make all the difference.
Especially during adolescence, it's a tricky time.
So much change, so much pressure.
And getting caught up with a cynical peer group, that can be dangerous.
Yeah, negativity can be contagious.
Surround yourself with people who are striving, up and out of their type.
People who lift you up, not drag you down.
It also cautions against trying to rescue the damned.
Oh, yeah, you can't save everyone.
And it points out how negative influences can bring a whole group down.
One bad apple can spoil the bunch.
It makes this simple observation: down is a lot easier than up.
That's true. It takes effort to climb.
Enabling suffering through avoidance or low expectations, it's easier in the moment.
It's comfortable, but it doesn't get you anywhere.
But real improvement, it takes work. It takes dedication.
There's no shortcuts to growth.
It takes strength to connect with truly good, healthy people.
It does, yeah. You gotta be willing to be challenged.
And you got to protect yourself from too much pity. Seek out those who want the best for you.
People who believe in you.
Exactly. And when it comes to measuring progress, it says, don't compare yourself to others. Compare yourself to who you were before.
Don't get caught in the comparison trap.
It can be so misleading, those external comparisons.
And discouraging, right?
It can lead to that nihilism again, like, what's the point?
Focus on your own journey, your own growth.
And it suggests that sometimes we're unhappy because we're holding on to the wrong desires.
We think we want something, but it's not what we actually need.
And our values, what we consider important, those might need a complete overhaul.
Reassess what truly matters.
It encourages us to ask, what can I do to make things a little better? To improve my being, to align myself with truth and good?
Those are powerful questions to ask yourself.
It brings in the lilies of the field, that biblical passage.
Yeah, I remember that one.
It's about trusting in a higher order, focusing on what's truly important.
Seek ye first the kingdom of God.
And while a mother's love is powerful, it also points out a potential dark side.
Unconditional love can be a double-edged sword.
Yeah, too much support, it can create entitlement, disregard for others.
Interesting.
It even uses Genghis Khan as an example. That excessive motherly love might have contributed to his brutality.
Wow, I never thought about it that way.
It challenges this idea of romanticizing childhood innocence.
Kids can be tough, right?
They can be. It says kids need structure, limits to develop properly.
Boundaries are good for everyone.
Discipline, even punishment. While it needs to be done carefully, it's necessary for socialization.
It's how we learn to function in society.
Reward the good behavior.
Hmm.
And when you have to punish, use the minimum force necessary.
A balanced approach.
And emotions, both positive and negative, they guide us.
They tell us what's working and what's not.
Yeah, satisfaction, hope, they reinforce good actions. Pain, anxiety, they warn us away from bad ones.
It's a feedback system.
It emphasizes how important it is to teach kids to navigate social expectations, to fit in.
Yeah, making friends is so important for kids.
Because kids who are constantly rejected, they face some serious challenges.
Social isolation is tough at any age, but especially for kids.
And while it acknowledges the struggles of different family structures, it makes a point that not all of them are equally viable.
Oh, that's a sensitive topic.
It is, but it's saying that some basic elements of family are more conducive to raising kids well.
Certain structures are more stable, you mean?
Yeah. And it reminds parents to be aware of their own negative emotions, especially resentment towards their kids.
Parenting is hard. It can bring up those feelings.
It can. And passive-aggressive behavior, that's damaging.
It's better to deal with those emotions directly.
It talks about Tolstoy, his struggle with meaninglessness.
Oh, yeah. Tolstoy, existential crisis and all that.
And it presents his solutions. Take responsibility, reject resentment.
That's a healthier way to cope.
Don't blame the world for your problems. Fix your own life first.
Start with yourself.
And tell the truth. That's a core principle.
Honesty is key, both with yourself and with others.
It connects morality, our sense of right and wrong, to evolution.
That makes sense. We're wired for certain behaviors.
It's in our DNA, and then it's reinforced by stories, rituals, things that teach us about sacrifice.
Delaying gratification, reciprocity, all that.
It even talks about a figure in the sky, like this metaphorical judge representing that moral development process.
Interesting concept.
When life keeps going wrong, it suggests looking at your values.
Maybe they need an update.
Yeah, sometimes you got to re-examine, even sacrifice some of your beliefs to grow.
Let go of what's no longer serving you.
It brings up Mary and Christ, offering themselves for a higher purpose.
Powerful examples of selflessness.
They represent a life focused on the good, on ultimate meaning, not just what's easy or convenient.
A life of purpose.
Suffering, it reminds us, comes from two sources. The world itself, it's harsh, unpredictable.
Yeah, life throws curveballs.
And then human evil.
People can be cruel.
And to deal with both of those, we need sacrifice and hard work.
Roll up your sleeves and get to work.
Evil, in this context, it's defined as conscious malice.
Like intentionally doing harm.
It uses the story of Cain killing Abel out of spite.
Pure jealousy and anger.
The dark night of the soul, like Christ in the desert, it presents that as a universal experience.
Everyone faces those dark moments.
Confronting hopelessness, despair,
It's part of being human.
and understanding historical horrors, it can actually make those inner struggles feel more real, more manageable.
It gives you perspective, right?
Yeah, like my problems are small compared to that.
It helps you put things in perspective.
There's this myth, Horus battling Set. Horus loses an eye, but gains inner understanding.
So, facing evil can be costly, but it can also bring wisdom.
Exactly. And it makes his point about doubt, how it can actually be good.
Doubt can be a good thing.
Yeah, it pushes us to question, to seek new knowledge. It drives progress.
Healthy skepticism.
It talks about Christianity, this radical idea of every soul having inherent worth,
Everyone is equal in God's eyes.
and salvation through faith, not works.
Grace over achievements.
But it points out that this focus on grace, it might have unintentionally devalued earthly life, made people more passive.
Like, why bother striving if it's all about faith?
Yeah, and thinkers like Marx and Dostoevsky criticize that later on.
They saw the downsides of that kind of thinking.
It brings up Dostoevsky's Grand Inquisitor, that story.
Oh, yeah, the challenge to Christ's vision.
It explores the conflict between perfect being, what Christ demands, and the church offering easier paths to salvation.
Faith in the afterlife as a kind of escape.
And it raises questions about the burden of freedom, of truth.
What does it truly mean to be free?
Discipline, it argues, is actually necessary for freedom.
Like rules and structure help us develop.
Yeah, it uses the analogy of a father disciplining his son.
Setting boundaries so the child can grow.
And it suggests that the decline of Christian dogma might have contributed to nihilism, to people being more susceptible to dangerous ideologies.
Without that framework, it's easier to lose your way.
It talks about Jung,
Yeah.
his idea of moral hierarchies, this battle between good and evil, Christ versus Satan.
That archetype, it plays out in all of us.
Yeah, it's not just a story, it's happening within each of us.
Our own internal struggles.
And it reminds us, even with all the suffering in the world, we can still make a difference.
Small acts of kindness, they matter.
Reduce unnecessary suffering, even in small ways.
Every little bit helps.
Expediency, taking the easy way out, that's a dead end.
Short-term gain, long-term pain.
True meaning, it comes from finding that balance between order and chaos.
Engaging with the complexity of life.
That's where real, lasting satisfaction comes from, not chasing fleeting desires.
A life of meaning, not just pleasure.
Tell the truth, always, even when it's hard.
Honesty, even when it's uncomfortable.
It uses a couple of examples, just showing how important it is to communicate openly.
It builds trust, it helps you navigate uncertainty.
Beware of naively formulated goals, what it calls life lies,
Those simplistic aspirations that don't lead anywhere.
like clinging to an ideology without thinking it through.
Yeah, rigidity can be dangerous.
When you make a mistake, it takes sacrifice to fix it.
Admitting you're wrong, making amends.
And avoiding the truth, it just creates this sacrificial debt that builds
It's
up.
like a debt to yourself, to your own integrity.
Blaming others for your own failings, that's a sign of inauthenticity.
Taking ownership is crucial.
And it can be a slippery slope to dangerous ideologies.
It's easy to fall into that trap.
Reason itself, when it gets too caught up in its own ideas, it can become totalitarian.
Like reason without compassion, without humility.
It uses the figure of Lucifer, falling in love with his own creations.
A cautionary tale.
Cultural wisdom, it's not static, it deteriorates over time.
We have to keep working at it.
And it's vulnerable to corruption, so we have to be vigilant.
Protect what's valuable. Adapt what needs adapting.
It talks about the past, how easily our memories can be shaped.
Memory is a tricky thing. It's not always reliable.
It uses the example of a therapist influencing someone's memories.
So we have a responsibility to be careful with our own narratives.
We may know a lot, but we still don't know enough to be perfectly safe, perfectly happy.
There's always going to be uncertainty, vulnerability,
He uses the analogy of a computer, how everything's interconnected.
systems within systems.
Even things that seem self-contained, they're part of something bigger.
We're all connected in ways we don't even realize.
Identifying with groups, it triggers these deep responses in us, emotional, even biochemical.
The power of belonging.
It shows how strong those social bonds are.
It's a primal need to be part of a group.
The world seems simple when it meets our expectations, but underneath, it's complex, uncertain.
Don't be fooled by appearances.
There's this image of a dragon growing in a household.
Oh, that's vivid.
It represents problems, negative emotions building up over time.
And eventually it explodes.
Ignoring problems, it never ends well.
Avoidance just makes things worse.
Kids playing rough, taking risks, that's actually good for them.
Learning to handle challenges, to be resilient.
It's better than overprotecting them, keeping them safe from everything.
They need to develop competence, not just avoid danger.
There are some personal anecdotes about navigating social situations, cultural differences.
Real life examples that.